Good evening. I'm Stephanie Mortis Stevens, and I had the honor of serving as the in-house editor with Trinity University Press for the Dear America collection. As a mission-driven organization, Trinity publishes each book with great intentionality. We're proud of them all, but it's rare that we have a book that comes out that has the true urgency that Dear America does. It is a critical collection for our times, and it's a call to action in light of such urgent challenges faced by our nation. Working on Dear America came at a good time for me. It gave me hope at a time that I was feeling hopeless, and I often revisit the collection to not only regain that same hope, but also when I'm feeling complacent to enrage me in the ways that I should be enraged at the things that are facing our nation. It's so important, and I'm so happy to that Trinity University Press and Terrain can share some of those voices with you tonight. In these Dear America town hall events, we explore different themes addressed in the collection, including natural environment, violence and injustice, activism and protest. Tonight's topic is ambient violence, clear vision in the face of injustices, in which we'll look at violences from the destruction of the environment to racial and cultural discrimination, to leading our children in active shooter drills. Things that have become so commonplace in our world today, but no less disturbing. It's so important, as our panelists remind us, to not grow complacent to these malignancies because of their prevalence, but to always look at them with a critical eye and hope for change. The event tonight is also streamed on Facebook and archived there and on the Trinity University Press page. The print and ebook is available at your favorite neighborhood or online retailer, but it is also available at a special price just for you at dearamericabook.org. In light of the current times, please consider buying additional copies to share with your family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, or even as a donation to your local library. This is a book we all need to read right now. To me, it helps me calmly assess where we are and to give me hope for the future, both alone and together. It is now my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth Dodd, one of the 3 editors for Dear America, along with Simmons Buntin and Derek Sheffield. She's a nonfiction editor for Terrain.org and an award-winning professor of creative writing and literature at Kansas State University. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. I am Zooming to you tonight from the ancestral territory of several tribal nations, including the 4 federally recognized tribes of Kansas, the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, the Kickapoo tribe in Kansas, the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas and Nebraska, and the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska. On behalf of myself and my wonderful co-editors, Simmons Buntin and Derek Sheffield, welcome and thank you very much for joining us. Before we begin, please let me say just a little bit more about this book, Dear America, Letters of Hope, Habitat, Defiance, and Democracy. This is such a powerful, diverse, and absolutely vital collection of poetry, prose, and artwork. Of the 130 contributors, 50 were never previously published. Not the writers were previously published, but the letters were never previously published. They're pieces that don't appear in our online series. So even if you read Terrain.org regularly, you'll want a copy of the book. All royalties go to 3 important nonprofits: the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the American Civil Liberties Union. And this portal, dearamericabook.org, is the way to maximize the funds going to these stalwart organizations. The editors appreciate the enthusiastic agreement of all the authors in donating royalties to these organizations and their important work. Or, of course, you can go through the bookseller of your choice, supporting perhaps a local bookstore. Meanwhile, the online series continues at terrain.org, most recently with a beautifully hand-illustrated letter by ecologist Lynn Baldwin titled Forest Refuge, Refugee, recounting her own migratory relationship across the political border of North America between Canada and the US, and the effect of climate change on the great forests of the continent. Did I mention the illustrations? As a field ecologist, Lynn keeps meticulous and lovely watercolored journals, and her letter reproduces some of these images. When you visit to read Lynn's letter, and I hope you will, please take some time to notice a few other things from the redesign that Simmons completed over the summer. There are still 19 days to enter our contests. Judges are Arthur Z. in poetry, Julian Hoffman in nonfiction, and Joy Castro in fiction. The submission portal closes at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on September the 7th, Labor Day. And now to our readers. Tonight's town hall and reading is themed Ambient Violence, Clear Vision to Face Injustices. Violence and its threat are abroad in the country. We know this. We look to writers and artists and activists and educators for their vision in calling out racist, misogynist, nationalist violence and the actors who gaslight or terrorize to foist their choice injustices into normalized policy. I'm so grateful to be in the company of these compelling writers and their resolve. We'll go in this order. Todd, Allison, Camille, and Heather, and I will introduce each one just before they read. To the audience, if a question comes to mind as you listen, will you please send it through the Q&A button, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes for conversation at the end. So, to Todd Boss. Todd Boss is a multimodal producer, writer, and innovator whose wide-ranging practice includes product development, literature, film, performance art, public art, and programmatic initiatives that often evolve into patents, companies, and nationwide activations. His first poetry collection, Yellow Rocket, was named one of the 10 best poetry books of 2008 by the Virginia Quarterly Review, and was a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award. He's also the author of Pitch, which won the Midwest Booksellers' Choice Award for Poetry, and the volume Tough Luck. His poetry has been featured in the New Yorker, Poetry Magazine, the American Poetry Review, Ted Kuzer's newspaper column, American Life in Poetry, and on National Public Radio. It's been anthologized in Best American Poetry and elsewhere. Todd, will you read to us?
Yeah, thanks for having me and for putting this together. It's an honor to share the stage tonight with such extraordinary writers. I'm coming to you from Navajo country in Arizona. I'm a Minnesota boy, but I've been summering here in Page, Arizona, which is just south of the Utah border. And it's been interesting to be here in Arizona over the summer. I've been struck by the heat and the relentless beatdown of summer weather here. I think it was just yesterday or the day before that the Earth saw its hottest day ever on record with 130 degrees not far from here. And I'm feeling that on a daily basis, not 130 degrees, thank God, but 105, 107, 104 every day for weeks. And it's a constant reminder of what's to come. I'll start with the poem that is in the anthology. I would like to put it in the comments in the chat, if that's okay. Can I paste it there?
Please do.
Good, we'll see if that works. It's called She's Going to Be Beautiful. She's going to be beautiful as she goes, isn't she? Gorgeous plumes of cinder, blooming rose in dying light. She's going to give a stunning show. The melting ice, the slow decay of zones. Our drones will play it all in full HD and lavish insult on the injury. All the satellite imagery, the National Geo photography. She's going to be calendar-worthy stuff, if ever again a calendar there be. Like forcing someone to disrobe and wishing you don't want to watch. The moon will touch her everywhere goodbye. An elephant, the last, inelegantly, will pass in a savanna gleaming gold. The cloud formations no one's ever seen, in towers shimmering with ash, we will no longer wonder to behold. All the coastal cities under sea. She will be beautiful, of course she will, and devastatingly. I didn't really come prepared to read any other poems besides that. I wanted to keep the focus on the anthology. And so I have one other poem I'd like to read from the anthology that is not my own. But first I wanted to say just a quick something about my own activism and what I plan to be doing in the next years about climate change and the complacency I think that you mentioned earlier. I think it takes a lot of courage to stand out on the street and march. I think it takes a lot of courage to write in defiance and to face the perils of the day. I think it takes a lot of courage to be any kind of leader, whether it's raising a child that understands the issues or raising up a community to address them. My way has always been through art, but I've recently taken an interest in biomimicry, which is a new field of science that looks at the ways in which human systems can learn from natural systems. And I've decided to enroll as a graduate student at the age of 51 in the Arizona State University's graduate program in biomimicry. I know you mentioned that some of the proceeds from the book will be going to the Union of Concerned Scientists, and nothing makes me happier than to know that regarding this project. I don't know if we have complacency so much as we have a lot of things that look like complacency in this country. And those can range anywhere from ignorance to a kind of willing distraction. We're an extremely distracted nation. There's lots of ways in which a person can look complacent. I think the antidote is knowledge, is learning, is reading, is listening, is problem solving, sorting all these things out actively, right? And my hat's off to those writers here in the room tonight who are doing that in various ways. I just want to close my time with a poem by Colleen McElroy called To Occupant. Elizabeth, I have this as a PDF, so I can't flow it into the chat box. Can I share it from my screen?
That's a question for Bergen. I don't know.
I know.
No, I can't. Okay. Then I'll just read it. To occupant. It practically leaves me speechless, this retrograde that renders you blind, American the beautiful. This happens under your name time after time. That's what I am talking about. That's what I am talking about. Tell me when I can stop on one hand counting black faces in movies set in the glistening metropolis. Tell me why it's normal. That is what I'm talking about. That is what I am talking about. Listen up. I am not them or other, a mob or color. The only pronouns that fit are I and me personally. That is what I am talking about. When I want you to hear, look at your reflection in the mirror. Own your mistakes. Do you have the Constitution for it? That is what you hear when I'm talking. Say it is not all right, not right to push the laws back when half of the real story has yet to be told. Talking about that, talking shade. Can you hear me, America? The same old, all this chaos and no disorder, not for sale. Can you hear me talking at you? How many died to get us here? Boys dead, girls disappeared, sheets wearing suits. The rest weeping when the horsemen come. I'm talking about who's not talking, America. That's all I have. I'm content to listen and participate later.
Thank you so much, Todd, for both of those poems. Allison Hedge Coke is currently a writer in residence at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. She is an award-winning poet, writer, editor, and filmmaker of Indigenous and European descent, and her work draws powerfully on this heritage and her experiences working as a laborer as well. Her books include poetry collections Year of the Rat, Dog Road Woman, Off-Season City Pipe, Blood Run, Streaming, and Burn. Also, the memoir, Rock Ghost Willow Deer. Streaming comes with an album recorded with Kelvin Bell and Laura Ortman. She is a distinguished professor at the University of California, Riverside, and a mentor and teacher in many other venues. She has taught for Naropa University, the University of California, Riverside, Northern Michigan University, Red Earth MFA, and she was visiting artist at the University of Central Oklahoma. Among other honors, she was named the Mentor of the Year in 2001 by the Wordcraft Circle of Native Writers and Storytellers. Since 2007, she has directed the literary Sandhill Crane Fest retreat at the University of Nebraska in Kearney along the Platte River. Allison, will you read to us?
Thank you. Coming to you from lands, waters, and air of Kanaka Oiwi people, Kanaka Maoli people. I'm really honored to be included on this panel with so many great poets. Thank you so much for putting the book together, and thank you everybody for tuning in. I believe I wrote this poem at deadline for the Dear America collection, either last summer or last fall, so it's about a year old now, I think. It's called Song for Long America. Sorry for having to turn sideways. I've got two laptops here. I don't have the book in print, so I apologize for not looking at you guys. Song for Long America. Dear US, the States, Estados Unidos, America is long, so long, Inukten to Yamana. America, Inukten to Yamana. Something fluttered sail-wide into blue wideness, oceans, opened outbreak, annihilation, postured presence, pressure, caught hands, heart, feet, heads, hearts, cut. America red, blue, cut her body for resource treasure, still is on, still takes, still vanishing, still missing, still defile, still murder, still disappear, women, children, still steal, still invoke elemental control for white profit, for posturing, and for posing upon the long, long place with long memory and longer soul survives. America is long. Long, long, so long, the continent sands canal, US cut at Panama. Cut the body to channel flow, Pacific and Atlantic. Cut the lungs, manifesting, money passing. Cut belonging, captured, whipped, bought, sold, ship sails, wealthy, fleet, economic, always economic. Look at it, this long place. Ocean bound, river blue. Look at this blue, complicit, statesian. These people, these children, indigenous, caged. Look at this blue, complicit, American, statesian. These parents, these grandparents, indigenous, slaughtered, bloodied, the states. Look at it, this long place. Look at it, this blue, look at this blue. Star-spangled night vault shielding earth with universe exploding, rockets flare, empty display, complicit, the states. Firing assault rounds into romance, into back to school, into music, into hope, into families, friends, kinship, communities, into heroes, into saints, into loving arms that hold you, into faces, necks, breasts, bellies, backs, torso, legs, feet, hands, heads, cutting life from husk cold, cutting life cold, cutting life, the states, extermination, all the beautiful, the continent kept in killing, kept in chokehold, strangle, I can't breathe, momentum, you are killing me, momentum, kept in plastic, crude oil product, plastic waterfowl massacre, water life massacre, microbead disaster, oil pipeline malady, gas fracking tragedy, heating up drowning, immolation burning, sacrificial for funding, kept in guns, kept complicit. She rests in her glory, glorified, glorious, glaring at all who challenge her destruction. 45's thumbs up, smiling with Melania's capture hold of El Paso, massacre orphan, lost bird, the states, the stolen, the removed, the separated, in the very short history of the states, scooping indigenous Latina children away from their parents from sea to Mississippi. Where is the love? Solid trust reposed on forest floor, up mountains, in deserts, on plains, riverside, in ponds, lakes, streams, and oceans wide and beautiful. In the world, hush baby, singing you to sleep now, singing you back into yourself, into the long, long, long America, away from the lonely tantrum you became, the states, away from your anointing the original people as constitutional, merciless savages, far away into a miraculous, mature vision of yourself, knowing, sing you into yourself, sing you back into the long America, into the place before America was misnamed, to the America of longer memories, names, into the place of cranes, the place of shallow waters, the place of cloudy waters, the place of good earth, the place of bad earth, where he split the butte, where she walked, where they ran through fire, where they appeared, where they rested, singing you into yourself from the self-destructive madness you have entered, singing you back into reason, back into song, slaying fascism, slaying extermination, slaying inconsideration, slaying monetary gain, slaying hate, slaying the sacrifice of all others for resources, singing you away from destructive habit, from hatred, from cruelty, from any tantrum you may throw, and beyond that gleaming, wealthy teenager you've become on the backs of those around you, into a surer self of these lands, these waters, these leaves, this fur, feather. The whippoorwill cry, seldom heard anymore. US Us, you are killing us. Us, you are killing us, the states, singing you into the land, love of land, abundance, life, respect, reason, sing. Look at this blue beauty, abundance, river, ocean, life, us. Look at this blue, murderous destruction, hatred, fill, US, grief, blues. Look at this blue water, healing sky, swallowing up, union in the sacred blue bowl of intricate design, water, sky, life, us. Look at this blue, America, all along of you. Look at this blue, specific. Look at this blue song, blue singing you back to reason, reality, respect, relation, resonance in blue letter addressed to you sincerely. And I want to read a piece by the chairman, Juan J. Morales. 20,000 pallets of bottled water. On a runway in Salva, under blue tarps pulled taut, FEMA's water shipment still sits 1 year after Maria against a backdrop of the people boiling river water. The agency apologizes for distribution issues, officials promising to test each bottle, though everyone knows it's as foul as their island support. In the gaze of aerial shots, pallet after pallet stretching out like a crumbled runway, the tallies of the dead jump from 64 to 3,000. And the mainland president tweets congratulations to all on a job well done. The island is a dry throat, a voice in the eye of the aftermath, hissing words unspoken elsewhere, commonwealth, statehood, independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So powerful. Camille T. Dungy was a 2019 recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship. Her collections of poetry include Trophic Cascade, Smith Blue, a finalist for the William Carlos Williams Award from the Poetry Society of America, Suck on the Marrow, winner of an American Book Award, a California Book Award Silver Medal, and the Northern California Book Award, and What to Eat, What to Drink, What to Leave for Poison, a finalist for both the Penn Center USA Literary Award and the Library of Virginia Literary Award. She's the editor of the watershed anthology Black Nature, 4 Centuries of African American Nature Poetry, which won a Northern California Book Award and was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. Her essay collection is titled Guidebook to Relative Strangers, Journeys into Race, Motherhood, and History. She is professor of English at Colorado State University and poetry editor at Orion Magazine, and a powerful example of literary citizenship. Camille, please read to us.
Hello. I'm coming to you from Fort Collins, Colorado, the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne nations and peoples, and also a traditional site of trade and gathering and healing for many other people as well. I'm gonna read an essay to you, so buckle up. It's like story hour. We're gonna be together for a little while here, hearing me read. I may actually have dirt under my fingernails right now because I ran in having remembered that I was doing this town hall. I got carried away working in this very garden that I'm describing here. I planted some evening primrose and wine cups today, which are native plants. I'm excited to be supporting some of the native bees with more local flora. Diversity, a garden allegory. Dear America, when we first moved into our house, the yard was tame and orderly. There were 3 aspen trees in the rear corners of the backyard, but mostly the plant life consisted of severely trimmed juniper bushes and a substantially weed-free lawn. Beds of river rock, so uniform in size and shape as to seem manufactured, edged these expanses of green. It was a well-manicured yard. This was the first thing about the house I set out to change. I've been pulling rock for 4 years now. Every spring before the heat comes on, and again in the fall before the cold settles, I rip out a new section of river rock and landscaping fabric. This is a slow process. The rock and plasticized landscaping fabric deplete the soil. Efforts to reduce natural diversity nearly always result in some form of depletion. And this certainly has been true in my yard. What I find beneath those repressed beds would be of little use to a garden. It's hard clay I have to amend with the compost I produce from kitchen scraps and fallen leaves. I also add topsoil hauled in from a landscaping supply store called Hageman Earth Cycle. I love the environmental vision inscribed in the name Earth Cycle. I also love climbing the small hills of topsoil to shovel some into my wheelbarrow and haul with me back home. It's the full-body participation in promoting an ecologically vibrant landscape that excites me. I try to salvage native earthworms I find under the river rocks, tossing the wigglers back into my newly enriched beds. The work might go more quickly if I hired a bobcat to scoop the rock, but I work slowly, extracting and replanting desirable vegetation whose roots have grown into the landscaping fabric. I spare centipedes and pill bugs, do my best to avoid spiders. Once I found an anthill teeming with creatures who were busy tunneling into the difficult dirt. I left them where they were. Proceeding this way, it may take me 12 hours to prepare a satisfactory 3-square-foot plot. I'll sow this with wildflower seed, perennial starts, tulip bulbs, and irises' gangly rhizomes. Within months, I will enjoy a riot of color where once there was nothing but hard gray expanse. In the center of my lawn, and also in poorly irrigated corners that had been overtaken by crabgrass and purslane, I have started more flower beds. Making these too is a difficult process, but not the kind of process that takes place on my knees, as does the reclamation of the rock beds. The object on the lawn is to turn turf into rich soil. I cover the grass with layer on layer of cardboard, kitchen scraps, topsoil, compost, newspaper, and mulch. At the end of the long winter, I'll turn it all with a shovel and pitchfork. Then I will plant my seeds. I begin around Halloween and must wait until nearly June before I can start to see any results. The process of changing my environment from homogeneous to diverse is rewarding, but slow. Because I garden by scattering seed, I never quite know what's going to appear or where. If, as Michael Pollan writes, a lawn is nature under totalitarian rule, my yard reveals a very different sort of possibility. My property yields an explosion of color come midsummer. You never know exactly what you'll find on my little patch, or whom. The August we moved into this house, I found canister upon canister of herbicides and pesticides on the work table in the garage. That first summer, very few pollinators braved the poison turf. They'd flit from one rare dandelion to the next, then buzz away, seemingly forlorn. But this year, I've counted numerous species of bee, more than 24 different kinds of birds, and a slew of moths and butterflies, including monarchs. I planted milkweed in many places around the yard. I planted other native plants as well. In some of this year's reclaimed beds, I planted handfuls of sunflower seeds left over from last year's crop. They have grown as high as 13 feet, delighting many species of neighbors, humans included. Side note, not in the essay, this year I have named my tallest sunflower Kamala Harris, because she's so tall and she's lifting as she climbs and she's smart and fantastic. And now I'm back to the essay. The brilliant goldfinches that hang out near our feeders eat my sunflower petals. I would prefer if they didn't eat my sunflower petals, but the sunflowers are there for them as much as they are there for me. And I am learning that birds eat flower petals, not just the seeds from the middle of the plants. Next year, to continue to attract these beautiful birds, I'll sow more sunflower seeds. The sunflowers and the birds who eat them fill me with joy I could not have imagined. The covenant for our homeowners association specifies that what I've done around my house is technically prohibited. There should be fewer wildflowers in my yard. Banish the milkweed, banish the tall grass, banish the front yard onion patch and the sad squash trials. When the sunflowers have finished flowering, rather than leave the dry stalks and seed heads for birds to perch and munch on as they stock up for their winter migrations, I should pull all those remnants of the summer plants out of the ground. There should be nothing brown like that around the yard, nothing that might be construed as aesthetically unsavory. Did I mention that my family is the only Black family on our block? That we're some of the only Black people in our neighborhood? That, in fact, we're one of the few Black families in our entire town? I say this now because it may help you understand that my resistance to the particular brand of suburban American monoculture my homeowners association promotes is also a resistance to a culture that has been set up to exclude people like me. A culture that, through laws and customs that amount to toxic actions and culturally constructed weeding, has effectively maintained homogeneous spaces around houses like mine. But I'm lucky. My neighbors claim to be grateful I've moved in and cultivated the most heterogeneous environment on our street. And the bees love the flowers, and the sunflowers shade the low-growing plants at their bases, some of which flower and some of which don't. A whole new ecosystem is thriving in my yard. Hardly anyone ever used to visit, but now it's alive and full of action. Birds I don't see on any of the neighboring lawns have taken up regular habitation around our place. Several mating pairs chose spots in our various trees and bushes to nest and raise their young. The worms I so carefully preserved to provide tasty snacks for robins. The worms I so carefully preserved provide tasty snacks for robins. I released 9,000 ladybugs to help with an aphid infestation on my Rebecca plants. Now I've seen an increase in creatures feeding on the healthy black-eyed Susans, and probably on some ladybugs as well. Swallowtails, painted ladies, and the occasional monarch pass through the garden in late summer. When our aspens succumbed to the scale that struck many of the trees in the neighborhood this year, and when we had to cut them down, there were still plenty of places for bugs and birds and squirrels to congregate, places that did not exist before I began the work of diversifying the landscape I found in my backyard. Though it fills me with joy to be surrounded by such vibrancy, keeping up with all of this isn't easy. This spring, it was as if every dandelion in the county called its neighbor to join them in our yard. I spent countless hours with my old-fashioned weed remover pulling weeds at the root. It occurs to me, doing this work, that one of the reasons we prefer homogeneity is that it can seem much easier. There is a man who comes to my house and fixes things. He's handy, smart, and strong. He has an eye for order and structure, and I defer to him when it comes time to decide what type of stain to use on the deck. He recently offered to help me out with the weeds. A couple of applications of chemical herbicide and my yard will surely look as neat as a magazine photo. I will admit, I have been tempted. My flower beds are spectacular, but the mounds of clover and bindweed scattered around the unimproved sections detract from the overall grandeur of my lot. It's difficult to strike a balance between acceptance and dominance. I have to come to terms with the fact that maintaining a poison-free yard will mean revising some of my opinions about what plants I want around me and which I do not. This is one of the key glories of cultivating diversity. When we cultivate diversity, we learn things we never knew we might want to know, things we may even need to know one day. Neither our river rocks nor our turf grass are edible, but the dandelions, purslane, sunflowers, cornflowers, California poppies, and curly dock I either cultivate or tolerate all have some nutritive value. The vibrant variety in my yard can provide sustenance in all kinds of ways. Our first winter in this house was hard on me. The killing frosts did what they do, and then there were the months without flowers. February came, then March, then April, and because of all that rock and turf, there was nothing to look at but gray and more gray until May came, and with it, some green. As I've spent the past years planting bulbs and seeds, and as I put in perennial starts, and as I've swapped plant cuttings with friends, planting plots in their honor, and as I've divided and rearranged tubers, and as I've cultivated the diversity of my garden, I have grown happier, earlier, and earlier each spring. I didn't know I was that dependent on color, on variety, on wanting so many different kinds of lives being lived, but evidently I am. Yours, Camille.
Thank you so much, Camille.
Thank you.
Those of you who are watching in the audience, I haven't been prompting you. Oh, thank you, Camille. Please do hold questions in your mind or put them in the chat, and we'll be getting to questions at the end of our reading. We will have conversation. So let us turn, please, to Heather Ryan. Heather is a mother, a writer, and professor. She teaches English at Wenatchee Valley College, a rural community college a few miles from the geographic center of Washington State. She has just moved her youngest child into her college dorm. Literally today, she moved her child into her college dorm, and as such has taken on a variety of new projects, including being union president at her college and working on 2 book-length works. The first is a mixed genre collection called Documentation, and the second is a memoir about a failed road trip and is currently untitled. She's also contemplating raising goats or bees or what she calls some other such nonsense now that her children are gone. Heather, will you read to us?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm in Colorado Springs right now, so ancestral land of the Ute, but I live in Wenatchee, which is the ancestral land of the Wenatchee tribe. I'm reading an abridged version of the essay that appears in Dear America. This essay is about an active shooter lockdown that we had at the college where I teach. Part of what I removed, and I think is kind of important to know, is the fact that 2 of my kids, who were 16 and 18 at the time, were on campus working, which definitely added to my fears. The other thing you should know before I start this essay is I told it in the form of a syllabus, which I think you can kind of hear if you're kind of cueing in. You should 100% buy the book, which then you can see that it's basically all bullet points, which is a really kind of fun and interesting way to write. And so this is, I cut out about half of it and tried to just like give you the sense of it. In case of active shooter, an active shooter is defined as an individual who is actively engaged in killing and or attempting to kill people in a specific and often confined area using a firearm. It is unlikely that such an event will occur on campus. However, in the event of such a scenario, it is imperative that you know and understand the following. If possible, leave the area. It will, however, be unlikely you will know which way to exit or how to avoid the active shooter. The area of a college affected by an active shooter is generally confined and is referred to as the zone of immediate impact. It is unlikely you will be in the zone of immediate impact. You should still take cover, barricade all entrances, turn off the lights, cover the windows, and stay quiet if you cannot leave campus. It is especially important all cell phones are turned to silent. False alarms are all too common, as we live in a culture that has decided a heavily armed citizenry is a good idea. You would be surprised by how many there are, though they typically don't make it this far being a full lockdown. Your professor will mention a false alarm involving a Civil War reenactor that happened at her children's school as a way to calm everyone's fears, including her own. She'll end the story with the phrase, "You can't be too safe, can you?" The phrase "too safe," used in a rhetorical question, will be said frequently in case of a false alarm of active shooter. In case of the inverse, it will not be uttered once. But in a lockdown, you can't be sure. You will hope this is a silly false alarm. You'll hope it's another Civil War reenactor. You will cling to theories like this, however thinly spun, even as you prepare for the reality that may soon come through the door. In case of active shooter or false alarm, it is recommended that you find items to use as improvised weapons, which include the following: stapler, 3-hole punch, lectern or podium, fire extinguisher, hot beverages or water bottles if full. In case of active shooter, this list of improvised weapons is not complete. You may feel the urge to call close friends and family. Resist this, as any noise, particularly the half-whispered, frantic, one-sided dialogue created by such a situation, can attract attention. You may, however, text your close friends and family. In case of active shooter, it is recommended that you keep text messages brief but sincere. Apologizing for any past wrongs or arguments is acceptable, though be cautious about instigating a lengthy exchange. Because you're mostly young adults, you may not yet fully understand the weight of those potential last messages as much as your professor does. This is a writing class, and she's committed to making you better writers, but even she will stare blankly at the screen of her iPhone and will wonder whom to text, what to say, and how to say it. Resist the urge to text your unrequited love a declaration of your affection. No matter the outcome of the active shooter scenario, you will make more problems than you will solve. Imagine his, her, their response if you do not make it out of the active shooter scenario. Imagine your horror if the active shooter scenario turns out to be a false alarm. Your professor will think specifically of the one former love she regrets losing, the one she still wonders about. She will half construct a message to him, then delete it. In case of active shooter and or false alarm, you may look at your cell phone and wonder how to send the necessary text messages to your family and friends. You may search for a joke to make it seem like you're okay, to make it easier for them. You will learn there are no good jokes in a time like this, no words that will be big enough to capture your fear and shaky hope and love. A poet might be able to write such a joke, but you are not a poet. Neither is your professor, so you can't ask her. It is recommended that your text messages to family and friends be brief and factual and include one clear sentiment that expresses the relationship you've shared. In case of active shooter, your professor will take pains to make sure you are okay. She will smile even though she too is shaking. She will help you move the table in front of the door, stack the chairs into a heap in front of that. In the darkness of the classroom, your professor may come to each of you and say a few words. Perhaps you have not known your professor long. Maybe this is the first week or two of the term, but she will want you to be calm. You may notice her closing her eyes and taking slow breaths. In case of active shooter, your professor's mind might play out various scenarios that could soon take place. She imagines the risk, the possible need for sacrifice. She thinks of her children, then sends their faces away. This is not the time to think of them. In case of active shooter or false alarm, you may notice the veterans will be the most at ease. One may gently say, "You got this, professor," in a voice so controlled and clear, it may remind you of a beloved aunt or uncle, helping you with some new skill when you were 5 or 6. He will tell your professor in a voice full of experience, "It's a lot harder to kill people than you think." In case of active shooter, keep in mind that you will probably live and escape physically unscathed. In case of active shooter, remember that this is a numbers game, and an active shooter has only thus far been able to kill 58 people at once. Your school has quite a few more students than that. Your professor has made a mental note to check the above bullet point annually to ensure the number is still correct when she revises the syllabus. She has revised it once. When you get the word that the threat was an explosion and reported gunmen close to campus, but that the SWAT team has determined the campus is safe, your professor will breathe deeply, once, twice. She will smile, turn on the lights, unlock the door. Later, your professor will sit at her desk and cry, the kind of crying where the body is incapable of speaking. In the first few seconds of the lockdown, one thought came to her calmly and rationally. You knew this would happen eventually. It is this thought that will allow her to understand what to do once the lockdown is lifted. She will be calm. She'll postpone an assignment, change a reading. She will usher everyone out, then slowly look over the room. She's taught here hundreds of times by now, and the room quickly became familiar, boring even. There's the printer and the reams of paper. There's the computer and the whiteboard and the projector. There's the collection of remote controls she still has not mastered. In the light canting through the blinds, the room will look newly sinister. The collection of staplers and hole punches at the front, the fire extinguisher set awkwardly back in its mount on the wall. In case of false alarm, you will be surprised at how quickly normality will return. How, within days, you will look for the hole punch without remembering the way you held it in your hands, tested its weight, and judged it as a weapon. There will be no fracturing of the class's personality, nor any sense of unification or coming together. You will be bored sometimes. You will make friends. You'll hate the person who sits across from you. Your professor will marvel at how easy it is to slip back into everyday life. How this will become a story she can tell over cocktails, as though it were the same as other stories of calamity narrowly averted, stories she has perfected. The car hitting black ice and turning slowly in perfect, graceful circles until it slumped against a hedge. The $500 deposit she made at the ATM that got stuck in the machine. The RV whose axle broke on I-5, the tire bouncing along the interstate, cars dodging it, the axle sending sparks all over the roadway in dainty arcs. These stories are different, she will notice. They are set into motion by natural or technological forces out of anyone's immediate control. Though she will still tell this story. She will laugh about it, laugh about her sobbing in particular. It will surprise her how quickly she will laugh. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you all, writers. This is such a wonderful, powerful reading. Thank you all. Before turning to our Q&A, I do want to announce the next and the final in our series of town hall readings. Terrain.org poetry editor Derek Sheffield will host the next event, which is themed Geography of Hope, Writing Toward a Better Tomorrow. It will take place September 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. He will be hosting readers Jeffrey Foucault, Chris Dombrowski, Ana Maria Spagna, Victoria Chang, and David Gessner. Please join us for that as well. Let me again remind you, you can register now from Facebook, terrain.org, Trinity University Press, or dearamericabook.org and get reminders of this next event. And you can purchase Dear America at 20% off using the discount code TOWNHALL. That's all in caps, TOWNHALL, at dearamericabook.org. Now, on to questions. I have a question I'd like to pitch to the entire group, and anyone, if you'd care to address it in any way that you'd like. The book is called Dear America, and we conceived it as Letters to America. Would you like to talk a little bit about what the epistolary impulse or the letter impulse might be for you at this particular moment? Even if, as Heather did, you took a very different sort of form for your piece. And it wasn't until you actually said it, Heather, that I felt the bullet points as something kind of visceral that I was understanding while you were talking. Would anyone care to talk a little bit about what a letter might mean to us at this moment?
You mean after they're dismantling the mailboxes and taking apart the sorter system? Well, there's that. You know, this absolute diabolical intentional destruction of the system that's been going on for the past 4 years. And, you know, one could say since colonization, you know, destruction of systems, but this is amped up in a recent time with the colonial powers that be. What does a letter mean at this time? I think a letter takes on a principal role at this time, because having the ability to be able to send something to someone who's far away, who may not be able to receive in any other transmittable way, including our votes, etc., has taken on a whole new meaning. Had we have envisioned this, you know, a year ago, or whenever we were writing these pieces for the anthology, the pieces would look very different, I think. Yeah, it's my 2 cents.
Mine is a little bit different because it's a syllabus, right? Like, as you mentioned, Elizabeth. And so I didn't conceive of it quite as a letter, but then when I was getting ready to submit it to train into this project, I thought, well, the syllabus is like the first letter that a professor gives to the student, right? And I've been really, like, my whole book documentation is really about forms and the ways in which they're used, and a lot of them, you know, not necessarily letters, but other kinds of documents, how they tell a story. I, you know, approached writing that essay as, like, you know, after I had that experience, and the thing that is, like, not that I didn't read was my 16-year-old son came in and he was like, why are you upset? You know, because he had been through this like several times. And I thought, someday someone's going to ask me to put something on my syllabus. And I could imagine the boilerplate language that I would get, right? from like the college to say like, here's what you need to tell students in case of active shooter. And so that's like how that kind of sprung up for me in terms of that like form.
I find that often there's the way that I construct essays and letters, there's not much difference to me. The way that I think about essays and what tends to take me to the page to write an essay, as opposed to a poem, has something to do with an awareness of a direct and immediate audience, and something that I want to directly communicate to that audience. And with poetry, it's a different kind. It's a more internal experience. Maybe the difference between journaling and letter writing, the way that I come to poems very frequently is a much more personal movement. But with essays, I intend to have a reader and I intend to convey clear information that I very frequently intend to be didactic and educational and informative. And so I don't really find that much disparity between what's happening when I'm writing a letter than what's happening when I'm writing an essay, except for that who the reader is more amorphous, right? In an essay, in a letter, I tend to know who I'm writing, or at least their title, Dear Chair of XYZ Committee. And so I think that that's, to me, part of this project, the Dear America project, is this, like, we have these things that need to be said, as Todd pointed out in the very beginning. There's things that need to be said and there's things that need to be done. And there are ideas that need to be shared. And so a letter, a syllabus, an essay, certain kinds of poems, they all have that kind of direct communication at their core.
I have nothing to add.
Well, thank you all. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. If anyone would like to pose a question to our panelists, please put it in now. Well, I want to thank you all again. Oh, there is one to Camille. I missed it.
I see it here. The question
Please
is, how do I navigate deed restrictions and the intolerance of the homeowner association? And I think that it's actually worked out for me. That I think I wrote that essay about 4 years ago now, I believe. And my idea was I was just slowly going to encroach on the lawn and slowly remove the rock, partially because I could only do so much at any one time. And I figured I was going to just make it so beautiful and wonderful that, like, eventually if anybody were to come and find me, they would be jerks. Like, it would just clearly be the wrong thing to do, right? And I was just going to slowly turn things over. And also, I do live in a part of the American West that is understanding water conservation and is understanding pollinator support. And as I am slowly doing this, my city is also working and creating new programs and pollinator support systems and xeriscaping systems and coming and doing water audits to help you plant less water. So by the time my yard is fully converted, it will probably be like the law in the town for everybody to have done it, and then the HOA won't have a leg to stand on. So that's kind of, I've just like, it's that, just do what you need to do and ask questions later. And also remembering that there's a lot of laws that are unjust laws, right? A lot of rules that are unjust rules, or that are based on old systems that do not support the way that we need to move our country and our communities forward. And one of the really important jobs of being an activist is to figure out which ones of those rules and laws you're just gonna ignore and move forward and do what you understand to be the right thing instead. And so that's how I got around the deeds, was I just ignored them. And I am now 7 years ahead of the other people who are being asked to do the things that I've already been starting to do.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, folks, for finding the question, and that is the perfect answer that we should end with.
There was one more question for Heather, but we may not
We're
have
a
time.
little after 8, and I tell you, I think deciding which laws you want to follow and which not, is that not the best place to end? So thank you all, panelists, readers, audience. It's been wonderful spending the evening with you. Come and visit us at terrain.org. As I said, the letter series continues. Visit us to purchase the book online or in your local bookstore. And everyone, take care. Be
And
well.
can I make a quick note? Just looking at the vitality of letters, when you are communicating with senators, with representatives in the House, people sign these petitions. Many people sign the petitions. Less people send a personal email. Far less people send a hard snail mail letter. Doing so puts it at the top of the pile. So use your epistolary writing to do good things now. Thank you. Sorry for cutting that in, but yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Allison. Yes. Good night, everyone. Take care. Be well.
Thanks for making this happen, Elizabeth.